Hi, my name is Pei, and you're listening to On the Payroll, a podcast about everything from CRM consulting to project management and delivery to teamwork and leadership and all the human skills that we need to do our job well in the software consulting industry. In today's episode, the very first one, I speak to Jasmine Ashley, whom I first met when I interviewed her for the Salesforce functional consultant role at Make Positive, where I was heading the project management team. What's really embarrassing about my very first podcast episode was that I said her name wrong. But it didn't matter because we went on to have a really fun conversation about how she found working in England compared to her home country of New Zealand. Without further ado, I would like to invite you to listen in on our conversation, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks. Hi, Jasmine. Welcome to On the Payroll, my very first guest. How are you today?
I'm good, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm so glad that you're here. Right. How about you give just a snapshot of how you got to be here, because you're from all the way the other side of the planet.
Yeah, no, thanks. So it's a little bit of a journey, but I'm from New Zealand and I wanted to travel the world. And when I was in my 20s, I came over to the UK to do the overseas experience, which is just two-year holiday visa, where you get to experience the world and then you go back to New Zealand. While I was over here, I worked as an admin in a events company, and Salesforce was being rolled out, and I didn't know what it was, but I rolled up my sleeves and did some UAT testing, so acceptance testing. My visa ran out and it sent me back to New Zealand. You get like a letter and a text and an email, and it says it's time for you to go home. And I was actually quite upset about it because I enjoyed my time here in the UK. This was back in 2012. When I got back to New Zealand, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll work in this Salesforce. I'll become a consultant, and then I can get sponsorship and I will return. So I went back to New Zealand, and for the first 6 months, I complained about how much better the UK was and how boring New Zealand was and how I was going to go back. 3 years later, I was senior consultant, and I got sponsored to come over to the UK. So back in 2017. So I've been here for 4 years. And just last year, I started my new role as a solution engineer with Salesforce. So that was a very long journey.
Oh, okay. So this is a tidbit that you and I know, which was when you came back, I interviewed you for the role at Make Positive. Do you remember that interview?
I do.
Yes.
I was so hopeful so I came over on my 30th birthday to do a whole bunch of interviews. I didn't even tell my parents. I was only here for holiday to catch up with my old friends. And I had 3 interviews lined up. But I remember your interview because I had you, and then I also had a fellow Kiwi interviewing me at the same time. And I really wanted to come over here, and I really wanted the job. We went through the questions, and a couple of questions we're going to answer today, like we're going to cover today, kind of like took me back to that interview as well. So yes, I do remember. And I remember going to a cafe across the street afterwards and then trying to run through every answer that I gave, trying to like position how I felt with that interview. It was very important to me. I got the job, which is great.
You absolutely deserved it. But let's take you back, as if I'm a psychotherapist. Let's take you back to that time during the interview. What was the question that you remembered me asking that stuck with you?
How do you deal with, have you had experience with conflict, and how did you deal with conflict? That's the question that stuck in my mind. And then I think later on in the interview, it came up again, but from a different angle. So it was to do with internal conflict. So customer and internal, that stuck in my mind.
Okay. Do you want to answer that? Let's answer that on the podcast here. In 2 parts. One is, what was your answer that you remember that you gave then, and whether there are new situations that's arisen since 2017.
This is so good because at the time when I answered the question, I couldn't, internal conflict within my team wasn't something I had experienced. So I felt it was a really odd question to ask, because coming from New Zealand, I'd done the 3 years of consulting back there. I hadn't had any internal issues with my project teams, because it was very much about do the job, pick up, wear many hats. If there's a gap, fill the gap, solve the problem, and then sort of address what caused that problem after fixing. So it was very much hands-on. So when I was asked that question about the team conflict, I honestly, and I remember my answer too, I was like, I don't know, I don't have anything to relate to that because I haven't experienced that. Bearing in mind in New Zealand, you only have maybe 2 project managers in my company, and they only project manage big projects. So once it got down to a certain size, you're doing your own project management. So the only person you're fighting with is probably yourself. So I just hadn't had the experience. And we had 1 technical architect for the whole company. And then they were a CTA, but we only had 2 in New Zealand. So it was very small, and then coming to the UK. So when I answered it at the time, I was like, customer conflict. Yes, I have had that. I have had customers that have had different expectations as to what they're getting, or even just a different idea of what Salesforce can do. And I've had to manage that. But internal team conflict, I hadn't experienced it. But now today, to answer that question, I have experienced it. And again, it's very similar to customer conflict. It's about expectations, communication, misalignment of what's happening in this vertical versus what's happening in yours. I needed that to cross over. Why have you not finished this? We can't do the coding if we don't have the fields. Those sorts of issues. Yeah, I've experienced them. So the answer today would be, how did I deal with those team conflicts? I mean, and I'm sure I'm going to have more in the future as well, because it's about people and it's about different objectives. Communication is it, and it's raising the hand and raising the flag and saying, okay, something's not right here. It's possible that no one's wrong. If that makes sense. It's possible that we're not wrong, but we're both not on the same pathway. So you think I'm wrong, I think you're wrong. This is really annoying. We don't want to talk to each other about it, but we have to sit down and talk about it. And in the one I'm remembering that's coming to my mind, I went straight to my project manager and I was like, this is your job. We have conflict. Here we go. And then the offer of sort of like mediation, but more like, let's sit down and talk about what's the pressure on them, what's the pressure on you, and to sit down and sort of work through, what do you need to get done to complete your vertical, and what do they need to get done to complete theirs. So the same as what I would do and what I have done in the past with customers, go straight to management or project manager and say, we have an issue, we need to sit down and resolve this. Pretty much apply that to internal as well, because otherwise you're just going to both go off to different, it's just creates a divide that's so much harder to bring back if you don't flag it. So yeah.
Okay. So I'm just following on the thread of what you were saying. So in the past, in New Zealand, you've had to deal with a lot of the conflict with the client by yourself. And so you have a level of stakeholder and conflict management skills that were developed in that role. Now, in the situation that you just explained, at what point did you feel, I'm going to have to escalate this because this is not working? Where did that point come? I'm sure you tried in the beginning when you discovered, you're not on the same page. At what point did you think, I can't get any headway?
When I got angry or when I got upset. So when I felt like I was putting in extra work where, actually, when you get angry and upset, internal, not external, when you're having a conversation and you're in a meeting and you're still feeling like you're not being listened to, or you think what they're saying is just so ridiculous that you have this thing that boils inside of you where you're like, oh, that you're not even listening to them because you're so mad, because you're like, they're not on the same page as me. And it kind of, it's that feeling of frustration. So once that builds up, then it stops you from listening, and then you end up not snapping, but being more, I'm a happy, cheery person, but when you start to be more short and just like do the things and just a shopping list of get the things done, and there's no, hi, how are you? How's it going? And it starts to affect you, then you know you need to address it because it's impacting on your ability to do your work because you're getting frustrated. So from a personal signal for me, it's when I'm feeling that bubbling up of just like annoyance that's really not necessary if you get time to sit down and think of the perspectives of both sides. But you need that kind of mediator, or you need, even when you're escalating it to your manager, what they do, well, what all my managers have done is they've been like, okay, let's talk about this. You have a rant, like just lay it all out there. Tell me what's going on. And then they add in perspective, like, oh, but maybe it's this. And I'm like, yeah, it could be this, or I think maybe this is going on. It could be that. And you work your way through. I'd still count that as an escalation. So you're still making them aware of what's going on. You don't necessarily have to go straight into mediation, but it's that thing where you feel it, where you're just not, it's affecting your ability to do your job. And the whole point of working together on a project is to achieve the outcome of finish the project. So yeah.
Okay. Let's stay on the topic, because you talked about clients as well. How do you deal with clients when you have conflict and you don't have a project manager to escalate to?
That's a good question. No, so in New Zealand, I feel like it was a bit of a flatter structure. So you don't necessarily have to be working on the same projects, but you worked in the same company. And then I had a mentor. So I have a mentor, sorry, he's still my mentor, even though we're far away. And even if he wasn't managing my projects, I'd still be like, hey, I have a problem. Hey, this is a thing. Hey, what should my approach be? Same for peers or anyone who's been in the company or been on projects, just anyone. I'm a person that will turn. This is why I miss working in an office, because I'm a person who will turn around and to the person next to me be like, hey, so this is happening. Do you have like any ideas on how I can deal with this? So you don't need a project manager. You just need someone for outside perspective. Going back to what I was saying before about those feelings and being able to sort of discuss them. But then from a customer side, there are processes for customers, and you have to tread carefully with customers, and you can't just say, you annoy me and this is annoying. There's a different approach to the way in which you have to deal with customers. And oddly, I think I have more like you have more of a resilience to your customers and less to your own team members, because with your team members, you're in the same boat. So you're wondering, why are you not working the same way I am working? When it's your customers, they don't know your processes. This is their first time doing a CRM implementation. Some of them may not have even heard of some of the terminology. And when you deliver a project, it's fast paced. So they can be frustrated. They have their day jobs. So there's a different set of sort of contributing factors to a customer being difficult to work with that are different to the contributing factors that make a colleague difficult to work with, because they're in a different world. You're trying to guide them in a process that they might only do once every 5 years, maybe once, hopefully, but we never know. So yeah, it's a different, it's different because your expectations of your colleague are different to your expectations of your customer. Yeah.
Correct. Very nicely put. Have you found any culture shock with regards to how Kiwis do business and the English do business? Let's hear it.
Oh, so so little things, because yes, we're colonized, and yes, we've got, the Union Jack is on our flag, and our accent is slightly different. But as soon as I got here, even in 2012, we don't put kind regards on our emails. And also, to be fair, I hadn't really done that many office jobs. I put regards on an email, and I had a meeting with my manager because she said I was coming off as short, and it was abrupt, and I wasn't. It was feeling as, I don't know, sharp. I don't know how that works. So I started putting kind regards, because I normally would put cheers or like, hey, like it's a more colloquial sort of vibe to it, because in New Zealand, when you are working in a project, you see them in the supermarket, their kids go to school with your cousins, like it's a very small environment. They might be at a friend's barbecue. Like there's been times when I've gone to a barbecue and there's been a client at the barbecue. It's more closer. So nobody reads into anything as much as they do on this side. The wording has to be a certain way. It's not saying kind regards and just saying regards meant that I was being rude, and I didn't mean to, but I even said to them, but when they meet me, I'm really nice. They should apply that to my emails. Text is hard to read. The other thing was, I think Kiwis have a can-do approach to see problem, fix problem. And what I found over the years, not just when I first got here, but off and on, there is a bit of a, we must identify who made the problem first, then we can solve the problem, but we must find the person or the thing or the reason, and then we can move on to fix it. Whereas I think, it might not be a Kiwi thing, it might be my thing, but fix problem and then talk about it after. Just fix the problem, fix it first. But there's a lot of like, oh, that's not me, that must be them. Oh, that's not me, that must be them. And that's fine. I can understand why people were worried about being associated with a bad thing. But that doesn't solve the problem. It just means that I had to jump from person to person being like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I just need to find out, like, can I fix it? Give me the permission to fix it. So there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like paperwork, like
barriers. Maybe.
Yeah. So there's barriers because in the UK, everyone's sort of got their department. It might be because it's bigger companies, let's be honest. And whereas in New Zealand, you're like, I'm making a decision. I'm running with this decision. I'm going to check with you if this decision's okay. Cool. And then you keep going, but you're already in flight when you're doing these things. Whereas here, I think you have to make sure all the right people are notified, which I can understand why if it's a big decision. And then there's that element of, well, it's not my department who made the problem. We must find the cause of, find the person. And I'm like, oh, who cares? We'll talk to them later.
Do you think that's a function of the size of the company that you were working in? Do you think that if you were in New Zealand and you went to a bigger company, bigger partner, do you think it would still be the same or slightly different? Because there would still be departments and there would need a few more processes to make sure you don't make those mistakes again.
Yeah, I think it's a fix first and then address after approach was where I came from. I don't know, because I didn't actually work for a big company. So the company I was working for had about 200 staff across 2 offices. 200? Yeah, that's it.
That's still not small, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
But but now I'm at Salesforce and it's massive. Like it's got thousands of people. They're everywhere. Like I don't. Yeah. So maybe that could be a factor. But I think there's a little bit of a. If we reel it back to the culture shock side, I think it was more of the whole finger pointing a little bit. So this is hard to explain. Like I noticed it more when I came here. That was it. So it was more of a roll your sleeves up, fix the issue, finger point after. But actually, even finger pointing is not really necessary. We should be learning from the mistakes that we're making and just making sure we don't make them again. But when I first arrived, it was very much like, oh no, that's not my department. Oh no, I had nothing to do with that. I was like, that's not what I'm asking you. I just need to know how to fix it. Let's fix it, sort of thing.
Fair enough. Why don't we start talking about some of the projects that you've been on? You don't have to give details, but one of the aim of the podcast is to share learnings from projects. So things like describe to me the elements of one of the more enjoyable projects that you've been on.
Oh, one of the more enjoyable projects. I find when people are enthusiastic off the bat, so when people make time, so I'm thinking, I reflected on a few of the projects that I did, and there are a couple of elements. Enthusiasm to want to change makes the biggest difference in a project. You don't have to know what you're doing or know what the change is or know what's coming, and it's still going to be difficult. But to be aware of changes happening, and I want to know, I want to learn, I want to see what's coming on both sides, be it the consulting side and the customer side, that's great because that's collaboration, because then you start running ideas and telling them about features and things that are exciting, and they genuinely are excited about it. And that depends on the levels, because that could be users and that could be CEOs, but an excitement for change to come makes that project, you want to be on that project.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the service implementations that I did are the more memorable ones. And I think it's because I'm not a numbers person, maybe. Like, I'm fine with numbers, but I'm not a targets driven person. I'm more of a problem solver. So I found when I was doing the Service Cloud implementations, you're working with people that solve people's problems daily. So they want to be better at solving the problems. So a lot of problem talking there, but they were more open to sharing their processes, and they're more open to actually making less clicks and having like routing and things to then be able to diversify their, like spread out their workload to help each other, because their role is to help. Mm-hmm. And then when you take it up to the higher levels, it's like, well, if we help more people, then we get better CSATs, and we get, so that's good too. So I found those, even when you're working on a sales project or a sales implementation, when you can have service people involved in it as well, that boosts the sales side, because then you get that crossover of, oh, when this happens, it causes these problems. Yes. But if we fix these problems, we can fix that process. So service, maybe I'm biased because I did so many years in hospitality, being a waitress and stuff. It's they see the customer, they hear the customer, so they've got more insight. What is the other thing? Building, it's kind of, it sounds really cheesy, but those projects that I worked on that were the most enjoyable were the ones where in my team, it doesn't matter if you're a graduate or if you're a project manager, whatever, when you all got together, everybody's voice was the same loudness, if that makes sense.
Yes.
There's a lot of this perception that having interns or having younger people, graduates or new people to the industry, they don't have to be fresh out of school. They could have only just learnt Salesforce. And there's this sort of, it's like a assumption that they need to be quiet and sit down and observe. Okay, in some elements they do. But when it comes to Salesforce knowledge, they are the most up to date because they have done the modules. Like I struggle with Trailhead modules today because I have to do them and my job, but they don't take priority. I will put them to a later date until I have to do them, and I'll sort of just ad hoc learn as I go when I'm doing my work. Whereas these people that are new to the industry, then they come in, they've sat down, they've put those hours in, they've actually gone through the most recent modules or the most recent certifications. So there were some magic moments in these memorable projects where I'd be like, oh, I don't know how we're going to tackle this problem. And then a new person to the team would be like, oh, well, you can do this. And this is a new thing. And this is something that just got released recently. And that to me was exciting because they felt like they could speak, which is great. And then also, I'm not completely up to date with every single line in the release notes. I will go in and try and find what I need and then jump out. But they have all that knowledge and they have that enthusiasm to absorb as much as they can. Like they're excited to study, which if I had time, I would be too, but they were so key. So I think that open communication within your team, feeling comfortable to be able to say, hey, I've got an idea, really makes those projects feel, because again, you're solving problems, but you're doing it together. You're not being asked to like, what do I do? What do I do? How do we do this? How do we do that? That pressure of being the central. So like as an IC implementation, you've got all these people asking like, oh, how should we approach this? Or how should we do this? But when you've got people saying, hey, I have an idea for how we can approach this. What do you think? It's such a good experience. It's that fun project, like you're working together.
Amazing. So let me just summarize. You gave 3 points there. One is where the client's really excited for the change. And number 2, if I remember correctly, is if it's a service project, there are things that align to what you are good at, your strengths. And number 3, for an internal team where everyone is pulling together and everyone feels that they can have equal contribution, even if they are very new to the industry. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that would make a project you would just jump at it? If you heard, ooh, that's coming. Let me be on it. What is there any other factors you think would excite you?
So this one is because over the years when you've worked on certain, it's like there's like a team. So I know this sounds horrible, but when you hear a person's name or someone that you've worked with, and I call it like your corporate tribe, like that group of people that you've shared, battled with, where you've learned hard lessons, where sometimes they've even said to you like, Jazz, that was really dumb, you shouldn't have done that. That's not, you've built that trust and you've built that connection, and you don't necessarily have to do it over multiple projects. It could be a 1-3 week project where you worked together, just two of you, and you delivered something, and you learned how to get along together. You learned each other's work styles. So there are times when you hear a name of a person and I go, oh, it would be so good to work with them again. I don't even care what the project is. Like, it would be so, do you know what I mean? Because it's like a trust. It's actually, it's a trust thing. So off topic a little bit, but I did a charity event a couple of years ago where we had to learn to dance for a dance competition to raise awareness for Sports Trader was the one. And I had no idea, excuse me, I had no idea how to dance. Like, I could do my own personal dancing, like I'm good at that. But this was tango, which is I thought would be easy, not easy. And I learned something from it that I then applied to actually work or life, but work as well. For the first 2 weeks, I was clueless on what I was doing. So you're learning the customer, or you're learning the moves, and you're trying to do the rhythm and all of that. And then they paired us up, and I was paired up with a complete stranger who I had never met. And we were learning the moves and doing slowly learning to trust each other. But he had to drop me face down to the ground, but not on my face, but like this, and then lift me back up again. And the first 5 or 6 times I kept putting my foot in front of me and not letting him do the move. I just couldn't. Like, I would say, yes, I'm ready. And then every time we got close to doing it, my foot would shoot out and I would stop. And he was like, you have to learn to trust me. And I was like, I don't know you. It was really, but then on the 8th or 9th time, we did it, and I did trust him. We did it, and we did it perfectly. And after that, we were fluid for when we were learning to dance. And I think having those projects where you struggle and you learn to trust, you learn to communicate, you learn to understand triggers. For me, I get hungry. And when I get hungry, I get short with my work, like just short, like not mean, but just very much like, get the things done. I need to get out of here. And working with people that go, here, Jasmine, here's a snack, have a snack. You know, like they learn how you work and how you function to make it more enjoyable, and you support each other. So the two kind of go together. It took 8 tries to trust a person to do a dance move with me. It takes a project for you to learn to trust a person to then be confident that you can then go to that next level to deliver, be able to deliver as good as you can, you know? So I think that's my final point on that one.
That is such a beautiful analogy. I really like how you tied in your personal experience with the dancing. That's so key. I think what you mentioned earlier on about creating relationships, creating rapport, connection with someone. And I think that people move companies for the people, not so much for the company.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories of a manager moving and a whole department following them to the new place. So what you're saying is not far-fetched.
It's your tribe. It's your tribe. It's the people. I don't know if that's an official thing, but it's what I've always thought in the back of my mind. That's my tribe. When they call on you, no matter, like even people in New Zealand, I still keep in touch with. If I was back home and they're like, Jazz, can you help me out with this thing? They're your tribe. You take care of each other. And because it's a tribe and it's not specific to a company, you can have more people, and there's no limitation on how many people you can have in that tribe of people you trust.
Amazing. Thank you. That's really good. So let's pivot now slightly to, do you have some examples of any character building projects? So by that, I mean those who've been really tough for whatever reasons, but after that, when you look back, there's a mountain of lessons you could take away, and that makes it worthwhile. Do you have any that you can share?
I do. I think each one I've worked on has been a little bit of a development to my character, but some were like more chill, some were more fun. So you learn a little bit about yourself with every project you take on, because there's different elements to a project. If it's a new industry that I don't know anything about, you have to go in day one like, hello, I know what I'm doing, I know exactly what's going on. So you do that research and you learn new things. So I think my one was the finance industry and insurance industry. Was I no idea. I don't like, from the like just the way in which they functioned, and even when it came to doing calculations and that sort of stuff, when it comes to finance things, obviously I'm not doing very well right now off the top of my head, but you have to get into that zone and it's scary. And it was, you learn on the fly. And I think what was in this example that I'm thinking of, what was character building, was you go in, and I would nod along like, oh yeah, I know what's going on, and then I go home and I try and do as much research as I could. But when it came to it, after a while, I was getting exhausted, and I knew I don't know finance. I don't understand when it comes to building the solution and making sure that it's going to meet all their needs. As a consultant, you do as they say, but then also you can challenge to make things work better. And I was missing out on the challenge to make things work better because I was just doing. Then it was character building, because it was about admitting that I didn't know enough, and then saying to them, I can't challenge you on this, but if you can explain it to me more, and maybe I can get my head around it, or like, let's take it a step down, because I don't really know finance. It's humble. It was like learning to be humble instead of that whole go in, do, solve problems, get out. It's like, actually take some time, admit that you don't know what you're doing. You can only Google so much in a short amount of time while you're still trying to do your job. And it worked. Like, it was scary, and I thought my professionalism would be under question. But when I thought about it, as a consultant that has to deliver projects across multiple industries, you can't be the expert in everything. Even though if you try, it's still, maybe there's people out there who have done it, but it's not actually how my brain works. I'm not very good at like being really good at lots of things. Like, nobody is, I don't think. So that was character building. That was a learning moment for me to admit that you can't do everything, like, which I think we all struggle with a little bit. Like, I wanted to be the best that I can be, but you can't be if you don't know.
That's true.
Yeah.
The challenging part of your role, or a implementation consultant role, comes with experience. After multiple finance projects under your belt, you will know what other people have done, whether it's been successful or not, what best practices are. And then you can go on to your next one with, I know all the answers.
And this is it, you get the gut feeling. So then, like, over time, I've done a couple of other ones, and then you hear a word and your stomach goes like this, and you're like, oh yes, this was a challenge that we had last time. Yeah, I agree. So then it's that. And now, even in my Salesforce role, when you're talking to the different departments, and you're talking to the different people who are involved in that process, there's still words that I hear that I get that gut feeling of, takes me back to that project, and I go, oh yes, I remember that, I learned about that. I think that's valuable. Like, you learn that gut feeling that you get. Yeah,
absolutely. And that just comes with experience. So from my point of view, when I structured that question, the scenario that you provided was not that wasn't what I was intending to get. No, sorry about that. Because the reason why is because, for me, I've done a lot, and that's something that I accept as a given. If I'm doing something absolutely brand new, I'm not going to know. I will tell the customer so, and I'll do my best, and I won't angst over it, because that's the way things are. And if I do 3, 4, 5, then I get better. And in my head, that's like a law of gravity. It just is. And to worry about it because it's my first time, it's counterproductive unless the expectations are not set properly. So as an example, if the customer expects me to be super expert and I'm not, then that would be anxiety inducing. But if the project is sold correctly, and if I was junior, and if the customer understands that this is the first project we're doing in their sector, and therefore there is some learning going to go on, and I'm just going to do my best, then I don't worry about that so much. I just worry about how much I can learn to make sure that I do a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about that setup, isn't it? It's about
Correct.
it's that pep talk that you should get before you go through the door. And I think that was, I think there wasn't a pep talk for that one. It was very much go in and just see what happens. But yeah, I agree totally. Yeah, and then you just have those moments some days when you feel like you should know more than what you know. But yeah, it's about managing it. Yeah, that's a good point. It's for you, it's not a thought at all. It's just this is the fact.
It's not,
this is how it is.
It's not, because I'm a project manager. And it's my job to make sure that my team is in the best position and that we set the expectations correctly with the customer. So when the situations where the sales team has missed out the project, I will do my very best to align all expectations before my team do the kickoff. So if the customer is expecting something different than what we believe we can deliver, that gets ironed out up front, because I want my team to be fully in the game and not worried about, oh, they're expecting somebody more senior and I'm not, blah, blah, blah.
I think this is something that's in my mind when it comes to, it's about setting expectations. But this, when I'm thinking about the challenges that I faced in a lot of my projects, it's the misalignment between what the customer thinks they're getting and what you have been told is happening. And then there's that gray zone where you're in the meeting, the introduction meeting, where you're going tick, 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 and you're like, oh, wait, they don't think this. They think this. This is not what they're expecting. And then on your feet, you're like, okay, now I need to actually change how I prep, like how I prepped when I came into this room. And it's about the alignment. It's expectation management and alignment. And interestingly, in my career, I then made a shift into doing pre-sales for a bit because I wanted to see what was happening behind the curtain. So you've got implementation is here. So it comes to you. We have a project for you. You do the project. Then you go into that room and then the expectations are misaligned. That's not what they expected at all. So I thought, okay, I'll go into pre-sales and I'll see what they're telling them before they meet us and get an idea of why are we so misaligned? What is being said in these meetings and what's being said in these rooms? And I learned that a lot is going on in a very short amount of time and not very much thought is going into it sometimes. Not every time, but the misalignment is from again, not setting the foundations and not saying clearly this is what's happening. It's a bit more ambiguous. Like you have needs, you have a vision. We're going to do agile. We're going to go in there. The team's going to be flexible. It's going to, you'll meet all your needs. You don't really know them yet, but we'll find them for you. That kind of high level stuff. It's about setting expectations solidly.
Yes. So from my point of view, I think the pre-sales activity, they talk a lot about the what you want, what's the future looking like for you. And delivery is very much about the how. And at that point in time, they don't talk so much about the how. And that's where it's quite key to bridge that gap, to make sure that what you want and how you're going to get it may be different because of budgetary constraints or your timeline. So you want this magical new system, but you want it tomorrow. Not really feasible. No. So it's about managing all of that vagueness and putting some clarity into it.
Yes. And it's like MVPs and things like that, it's the like I can see how it happens, but it is just key to solidify it and make sure that it's all. I'm kind of rambling now. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Because I think that all disputes and all arguments, and I'm not talking just professionally, but in your personal life, with my kids, with my friends, it's all about expectations. So in my head, as a project manager, that phrase, it's everywhere in all situations. It's managing expectations. And does my expectation needs to be reset? am I expecting something too much, too high? So I have that conversation with my kids quite a bit, especially after we have a mini conflict. And I'll say, was there something that you expected me to be, to think, to say that's different than what I actually did? And then we have a kind of conversation about that and how I'm going to be the same next time, because they leave the mess around again and I will be the same again. Like I said, being empathetic and active listening. For the 50th time you leave your clothes on the floor, I'm well out of that.
Yeah, we will get there eventually. I think and that example also kind of fits with in the project sense as well, because this, again, like I said at the start, this is their first time. Like, so they're in the pre-sales element, or even just in the beginnings of any engagement with any customer, if it's their first time, or maybe even only second time, like with the clothes on the floor, it takes 5, 10, 15 times, but they've only done it once. This is their first time. So when we don't communicate expectations clearly from our side, they also probably don't practice communicating their expectations either. Absolutely. It's like you kind of need to have an actual set time in that meeting where you go, now we're going to discuss expectations. Like, you really clearly need to just sit down and say it out loud, because they've never seen Salesforce, or they've only seen a demo, or they've only been to seen it on some advertising if it's popped up in some algorithm, but they've not actually gone through this process.
Yes.
So a lot of our customers are looking at us to guide them, because we've done it so many times. But when you do it so many times, you forget what the first time feels like, and you forget. So for you, clothes make sense, put them in the laundry, but you forget how hard it was to develop that habit in the first place, and how much training it took for you when you were a child to learn that that's where that goes. Maybe you're fast, maybe so, but you know what I mean? Like, whereas and the customers are, actually, that's a really good point. It's empathy, because customers, they love it's their product, it's their company, it's their baby. And there's a bit of they want you to feel the same way they feel about their company, their baby. So they expect for you to be 100% like, this is my everything. But as a consultant, you've done back to back. You've got other things that you're working on, or you've just finished a project with that company. So if you're fully in that one, and then you've got to fully throw yourself into that one. So we do it. So it's on a rotation. But the customer doesn't know that. No. So then it's like, why don't you care how I care? And you're like, if I did, my heart would break every time I finished a project. Like, I can't commit myself 100% to like the same way you do, because this is your business and this is mine as consulting, Yes.
Jasmine, sorry, I had so many questions. There's no way I'm going to get through them. And I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I'm thinking that I need to get you in every few weeks and continue this conversation, because it has been amazingly enjoyable. I have such a long list. Yes.
I feel like I just rambled as well, but I was like, oh, these are good questions, and these are things that I haven't really had a chance to talk about either, like, except for the job interview scenario. That's the only time you really talk about the experiences that you have had, but you don't get to sit down and solidly just like go through and go, what reflection in this kind of environment. So thank you for interviewing me again. And for setting this up and having this conversation, because as I'm talking about these things, it's making me think about these things. It's making me like refresh those learnings that I've had over the years, and it gives you good perspective.
I'm really, really glad that you've been my very first guest, and that we have gone through so much and just scratched, I think, what it's like to work in consulting, in projects. And the key themes that came out today was about communication, about people, about team. Technology was secondary.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that Salesforce is very fun and very sexy, but the key things that make work enjoyable, especially in the project sector, is about people.
Yes. We say that we have a saying at home, it is people. So that is society, it is community. And our work life should be. We are, at the end of the day, people are behind businesses. Humans run businesses, so it is people.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
I would love to do this again as well. So if you do, I would love to be do another session, because I feel like you said, we only scratched the surface. There's so many different modules to doing projects as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can pick multiple themes and deep dive into each one on separate sessions. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate that, and I will see you again soon in a different call.
Yeah, cool. See you. Thank you. Bye.